Oh, I'm green lines on the screen too. I apologize. I don't know what that's about, but oh, look at that. Sorry. I don't know.
Having
what
some decorative elements there.
I don't know what happened there. I think I accidentally did that somehow.
Did you do that somehow? That's super
Maybe,
cool.
no. See, raise.
You want here?
Hi,
I don't know.
Hello, everybody.
All right, Martha, we are recording and all, and we have beautiful green lines on our, oh, they went away. Whoever did that. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Great. Well, we have called today's meeting to order, and the first act of business is approving the agenda. So we can take a quick look at the agenda. Are there any questions or comments?
I have one. There's an S on my name. Oh, that's for approving the minutes. Never mind, I approve the agenda.
Great. All right. So do I have a motion to approve today's agenda?
I think that's what I did. I approved the agenda.
All right. Thank you, Deb. Do I have a second?
I second that.
Thank you, Sabah. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And Charmaine, if it's easier in the chat, we can use the chat too. I don't think Jody is. Okay, thank you.
Sorry about that. Zoom is all
No worries.
ruffled, but I'll get there.
Thank you. All right. The next order of business is to take a look at last month's minutes. And so we didn't have a meeting last month, so they are actually going to be from September's minutes. Any questions or comments on September's minutes?
I have a comment, Martha.
Sure.
My name is misspelled. I don't have an
fixed it. She just fixed it.
Yeah, I saw you.
Okay, so that one's
On
fixed.
record.
It should go on record, and it actually absolutely should go on record. And I will make sure when it's
I'm sure it's a
posted
typo.
on the website that it's the correct version.
Thank you.
So pending the change of Deb's last name, do I have a motion to approve last month's minutes?
I'll motion to approve last month's minutes.
Thank
And
you,
I'll second.
Sabah. Deb seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great. The next is space for public comment. It doesn't look like we have any public members, but we do have a staff member here today, so I'll pass it off to Beth to introduce them.
Thank you. I do also want to acknowledge that Michelle joined us in the Zoom, and so welcome, Michelle. And Tina Martinez is here in the room at Northforth, both guests, and we'll talk a little bit more about their being here a little bit later, but just want to say welcome. And then we do at every board meeting bring a staff member to join us. And today Shayna Ernest is with us. She was out sick today, so she may have her camera off, but she's here. And Shayna, we have a really busy agenda today, so we're going to try to keep it tight. But I do ask all of our joining staff members 2 questions. First, to oh, welcome. Oh, are you Michelle? You're here in person. Welcome. Join us. I'm super glad that you're here. No worries. And I apologize. We were worried, like, how are we gonna get you here? I'm sorry. That's okay. I might be able to. I don't even see you. There you go. There, you've dropped. Welcome, Michelle. Glad to have you here. No problem at all. No problem at all. And I turned the heat up because it was cold and now I'm feeling hot. So as soon as I talk a little bit more, I may go turn it down again, or it'll probably turn itself off because I only raised it a few degrees. But Shayna Ernest is currently a math and visual arts teacher at our MDC campus. But she's held quite a few other roles with the school as well. She's in the past been a science teacher for us. She's also been involved in a variety of initiatives, including our Indian Ed program. She jumps in wherever she can, certainly. And she works really well with students. I usually have all these wonderful things to say, and I just have to start by saying that Shayna is one of my favorite people, that I do have a personal relationship with her outside of work. And so I need to be transparent about that. We've been friends for a long time. And she's a great asset to the school beyond our friendship. She cares deeply about students. She really understands what it means to teach not just math content, but the principles of math, which I really respect. The problem solving and the critical thinking that's involved. She's been at a variety of campuses, including our Job Corps campus. She's involved in our Friday enrichment program down here. She really does jump in and just do a lot of different tasks. And so welcome, Shayna. Super glad that you're here today. Super glad that you're on the team. My two questions that I ask all visiting staff members are, what does your day look like? What is an average day or average week? Because days are so different as the math and visual arts teacher at MDC. And two, how do you see our mission and vision in practice in the work that you do?
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for that introduction, Beth. I guess I've been with the school for quite a long time, since 2013. I started as an educational assistant and I liked it so much I got my teaching license. Yeah, a typical week, there's a lot going on in a week. Mondays, I spend in class in the morning with the ladies in the Fox unit, and the rest of the day is devoted to getting things prepared for the week and making a plan to visit all of the students who are not in school pods. My Tuesdays are pretty stacked with classes. I teach 3 classes in a row, so that day I'm fully in the classroom and just engaging with students who are able to come out into the classes. My Wednesdays and Thursdays are also spent pod walking. I've added a Thursday afternoon class with the GED group. My teaching math, this year I'm really trying to work with the high school students as well as the GED students, just since math is such a high area of high need and needs a lot of attention. So I teach all the groups at MDC, and then I also do my best to get into all of the different units out there. And sometimes it's successful. Sometimes, we have lockdowns that get thrown in, or lots of different things can happen at MDC. So being flexible is really important. And then the Fridays are great. I spend Fridays at the North Fourth campus. So we do our meetings in the morning, and then I'm there to support programming in the afternoons. And that's something that I really enjoy. A couple Fridays back, there were 2 students that I saw, one from the high school program and one from the adult ed program, who had recently gotten out of MDC. Both had made it by the school that day on that Friday at the North Fourth campus. And so it's a really a joy for students who are getting out of incarceration and then staying engaged with our program. And it's just something that was a really important to me a few weeks ago. Made me really happy to see some students that were familiar faces in the jail, but then outside, it's wonderful to see them there.
And on a non-instructional day, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Shayna, but we do have those transfer
Yeah.
students, but then to see them on a day that's optional, right, is like, yeah, that's exciting.
Absolutely.
Sorry to interrupt, but it is exciting.
No, it's okay. And I do tell the students there, like, if they think that they're getting out soon, I let them know that I am there on Fridays. We have some extra programming and things that are available. So I feel like it's nice for them to be able to see a familiar face, just like when Jay comes into the jail, or they get to meet people that they will see at North Fourth. So I think that provides some nice continuity for students and helps them feel welcome. As far as the mission vision for our school, I first started with Gordon Burnell out at the jail as an educational assistant. Prior to that, I'd worked with a homeless population. My degrees are in criminology and sociology. And I feel so strongly that the work that we're doing, especially in MDC, is so important. People are, when they arrive to our school, it's obvious that they've struggled a lot. They've had to overcome a lot of hurdles, and that, just knowing that people care um, about what they're doing, and they care about educating them and providing opportunities, no matter where they might end up. That's really important. Especially we've got students that are coming in pretty young and facing some pretty long sentences. But we try to reinforce the idea that, you get to choose how you show up every day, and that taking education seriously and improving your skills is a way for you to show up for yourself, no matter what circumstances you find yourself in.
Thank you, Shayna.
It was really wonderful to hear about your daily work throughout the week, Shayna, as well as how long you've been with the school and your passion for supporting students. So thank you for joining us for today. And we look
Absolutely.
forward to seeing you either at school sometime or at one of the graduations.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
You're welcome to hang out, Shayna, if you want to see a board meeting. It is open to the public, but we also understand that you've been sick. So again, we appreciate your time. So thank you.
Okay, I think I'm gonna log off, but thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yep, take care.
Okay,
Thanks.
bye-bye.
Okay. All right, we'll go to past business. Beth and I actually discussed this in our prep meeting of that we typically don't have past business. We will identify it as if there is an item that's tabled that we need to return to, that will be an area for past business. So but if there's anything else that you think we should label as past business, please let us know. Because we don't necessarily want it to be something where we think, oh, we never have past business, but just wanted to kind of note that we did discuss that. And then on to current business, we'll pass it over to Sammy for the business manager report.
So we do have 2 packets to go through, just because we didn't meet last month. And so we'll get started. I'm not gonna do these bars because they're actually on the other packet. But this again is September's financials. And so just to get started, everything looks good here with our spending and our encumbrances. I always like to point out the percent of budget here. You just don't want to be over 100%. This is the only one that we have that's over right now, and it's just over encumbered by a position, and it's already been corrected as of right now. And so, but that's what that is. We were just deciding where we wanted to move the over encumbrance to. But the rest of them look good. You'll see on both of the packets that the percent of budget for our federal funds, our reimbursable funds, we have high percentages already, which is great. That's really been a goal for us, is to get those federal funds spent down early. And so we're really working on that. Looking at our current revenue, we're bringing in revenue, which is what we're looking for. Some of them have not come in yet as of September. It all depends on when we receive our RFRs. So that's super important to pay attention to as well, just the timing. Our yearly expenditure comparison, not a big change, just a slight change right here. This is the current year, prior years, but nothing out of the ordinary here. Our expenditures by function and by object. So again, I always like to point out this function because this is what's telling us the spending in the classroom. Let me make it a little bit bigger so you can see better. There we go. So we're at about 65%. It's been holding steady. You'll see that next month we do drop down because we did encumber our big payment that we are paying right now to actually almost pay off this building that we're in. And so it is a $1.1 million payment that we've broken up into 3 payments, but we did encumber it in October. So you'll see that this will shift down because we're spending more on capital than we are instruction. Not more, but more. It'll skew the numbers basically for the rest of the year because of those. Our monthly cash balance, again, this is how much cash we have on hand to cover our monthly reoccurring expenses. Right now, we're at an 8.15, which is about 8 months worth. This is great. We have very solid cash right now. We have over the years, so this looks great. Any questions on any of these? No. This is just a more detailed breakdown of our funds, where we're sitting with our funds. Like I said, this is that one that we had over encumbered and we did already correct it, but the rest, it looks good. And then we have our check report. We did go through these. There was nothing out of the ordinary here. Did anybody have any questions on any of these?
And for guests, just so that they know, we had a finance meeting prior to this. And so that's our time that the finance committee goes into the finances a little bit more in depth, asks those questions. And so we had discussed with Sammy, you know, how much of the packets we should show, because each is about 60 to 70 pages long. So just checking in also, Deb and Charmaine, are there parts of the finances that you really prioritize that you would like us to go over for future board meetings?
Not for me, because I pretty much look at those exact charts. I don't go through 76 pages. I can look at the checks and see that we're spending our money on retirement and things like that. That's what our big expenses seem to be. And otherwise, I look at those charts. I'm good with what we've got.
Okay, yeah, that's kind of what we had agreed upon too, is that kind of the most important meaty information is for us to look at the bar graphs and charts. And so Charmaine agrees, and we can check in with Jody in the next meeting that she's in as well. But all right, thanks, Sammy. You can continue.
Sure. So I'm gonna skip down just to point out really quick. Our bank reconciliation, we zero out, which is what we always want to balance out. We do have 2 outstanding checks that we were looking into that carried into next month that you'll see on the next one as well, but we are already working on clearing those. And so the next packet, this has all of the bars. There we go. And so the first bar is an increase for our private direct grants. We got an award from Sprouts for $10,000. And so it is more of a discretionary fund. And so that's why it is coded here. Our next one is an increase for our universal free lunch. We projected an amount when we budgeted and we received our award and it was higher than what we projected. And so we just have a slight increase of $2,000. We have quite a few transfer bars here. You'll see the 4 of them, 2 for operational, 1 for CSI, and 1 for our CTE program. This is just cleaning up our funds at the function level, making sure we're not over budget anywhere at the function level. So we're just transferring money there. And then we have another increase. This is for our community school grant. And so again, we were told that we were awarded $75,000 originally, and we received a final allocation with $30,000 additional dollars. And so we just need to do that increase of $30,000. And then last week we did receive our award letter for our lease assistance. And so we wanted to get that on this meeting so that we could get budget authority right away. And I was able to get it on last Friday. And so the award amount is pretty similar to what we predicted, but this is huge for the school, of course, because it does pay a large portion of our lease. Did anybody have any questions on the detail of the bars? Perfect. Keep going. Again, we like to look at this percentage of budget and you'll see that this fund was corrected. It's no longer over budget. So that's what we want to see. Sorry if it's really little. That's a little bit better. But yeah, we're just making sure that we're not over budget anywhere here, and those all look good. We are receiving our revenue, which is great. Again, you can see that we're starting to get that current year revenue. We're receiving RFRs, things like that. And of course, our SEG is over here. Not a big change in expenditures from one month to another, just a slight increase, which is normal, but nothing out of the ordinary. We did make the first payment on that $1.1 million payment for the building this month. And so you'll see that these months will have higher amounts because we are making that payment over 3 months. And then you'll see here, our percentage did drop because our capital increased. That's because we encumbered those funds in the month of October. Any questions on that specifically or anything? No? Our liquidity, we're sitting about a 7.63 as of October, which is still solid. So there's no worries there. We're just kind of staying with that progression. And again, the more detailed breakout of our funds and how they're being spent. And then same thing with this checklisting. There wasn't anything out of the ordinary or anything that we really wanted to point out. Sabah had a good question though on the finance committee meeting, and I didn't know if anybody else had looked at this. On our payroll vouchers, our payroll payments, we do pay child support for 2 employees. And so if you ever see this New Mexico child support enforcement, it is specifically a garnishment for 2 employees. It's not just the school paying. And then we'll just jump down to our bank rec. And again, we do zero out. Then our outstanding, like I said, we have 2 checks that we are waiting to hear back. This one, we're still waiting to hear back from the vendor, City of Albuquerque. We don't know why they haven't cashed this check, but I have other schools that it is still outstanding as well. And then this one is for an employee. It was a reissued payroll check, but she ended up receiving the deposit in her account. And so we just need to void this one. But other than that, you'll see everything is from that month. So we don't have any stale dated checks. Any questions? Cool. That's all that I have then.
Great, thank you, Sammy. And I think for this one, we can go ahead and skip down to action items. So our first action item is approval of accounts payable and payroll vouchers. Do I have a motion to approve accounts payable and payroll vouchers in October and November?
I'll motion to approve those accounts.
Thank you, Sabah. Do I have a second?
I second.
Thank you, Charmaine. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great. We have approved accounts payable and payroll vouchers for October and November. Do I have a motion to approve the budget adjustment requests for both October and November?
I just realized it should be.
I'll motion to approve the bars for October and November.
Thank you, Sabah. Do I have a second?
I second.
Thank you, Charmaine. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great. We have approved the budget adjustment requests, both October and November. Welcome, Jody. Nice to see you.
Sammy and I just had a little side conversation.
Sure.
We needed to approve accounts payable, payroll vouchers and bars for the board meeting in October and the board meeting in November, but they're actually finance packets for September and October because we
Oh,
do the
yes.
packet for the previous month. So I can make those adjustments, but I think that we should make sure that it's in the notes and in this recording to that clarification that what we're actually approving are the finance packets, which include payroll and payroll vouchers and bar adjustment requests for the months of September and October. We won't review the November financials until December. So that was a typo on my side. And I think that if we can get into the notes, that clarification, then we should be okay moving forward. But I apologize for that oversight.
Thank you for pointing that out, Sammy. I didn't think about that either when I was saying it out loud, but that makes sense. Yes, we were approving them for September and November, both accounts payable, payroll vouchers, as well as budget adjustment requests. Any other questions or comments from our board members are also clear with that for the notes? Okay. Yeah, I think that's all for finances. Any last questions for our finance team before they head out?
Thank you, ladies.
other building?
I know she needs to get across.
I don't know.
I'll bring it back.
I'm gonna give you my keys so you can
Thank
cross
you.
the bridge to
I had Terabithia.
Terabithia. That's what I was thinking and I couldn't remember what it was. You were in my brain, Diane. I love that.
Great. Well, we'll move forward with Beth's director report.
I appreciate that. All right, we have so many tabs open. Thank you, Sammy. All right, so looking at, I closed the chat. And so maybe Martha or Sabah, somebody that has the chat open can let us know if someone is trying to get our attention in there, but I think it's hard to have it open on the screen here. So just so you know, I'm not watching the chat, but we have.
Totally
other-
understand.
on
Now that
Zoom.
I'm online, I can go ahead and be in charge of the chat, Beth. And it was just, I had said hi to Jody just as she came in, and then we had the conversation about the dates or the months. But she is joined us now, and she had been attending capstone projects. How cool is that, Jody?
Very cool. Good to see you, Jody.
Yes,
So,
well,
welcome, November 2024. There's quite a bit in the director's report today, so I'll try to make it succinct, but as always, please stop me if you have questions, if you want me to review something. And I'm gonna go ahead and get going. So we welcomed Shayna at the beginning. I have a couple things in here that are just reminders to me because I use the same template every month for the director's report. We do not have any new contracts or purchases over $60,000 that need approval. We do have some new and potential or expiring fund sources. We got the lease assistance that Sammy mentioned, which is great. We are paying down or using that $1.105 million that we raised at the last legislative session. I went to the bank today and wired that first payment. It is on a reimbursement, and so we can't pay it all at once because it would drain our checking account and make it difficult to make bills while we waited for the reimbursement. So we're splitting it up over 3 months. But that was super exciting to go and do that today. We will almost have this building paid off come January. So super excited about that. I did mention that we are back at it requesting capital outlay. We've got a lot of support and we've got some real partners out in the legislature evidenced by the amount of money that we raised last year. So why stop? I've already started with some legislative briefings. Representative and in Naunu, which I hope I said her name correctly. I've practiced it with her, but it's got a lot of vowels in it. And Representative Matthews met with me yesterday, and I've got several of those meetings set up over the next couple of weeks. As a reminder, we do work with Jason Weeks as a government relations advocate. I don't like the word lobbyist because it just feels weird to me. It makes me think of you know, some of those other big competing forces out there. But we're really grateful to work with Jason. He's also represents Bernalillo County up in Santa Fe, and so he's done really well for us. And so we're sticking with him. Sammy even goes, "Who are you working with? Because other schools don't get that money. Can they work with him?" And I'm like, "No, stop giving away my secrets." We have a great relationship with Bernalillo County, and their board said that there was no conflict of interest for him to represent us as well. And so that's been really successful for us. I did welcome you if you want to join and kind of see my presentation on December 5th. I'll do another one of those legislative briefings. I am asking for $500,000 to develop the land that we purchased next door. If you drive by on 4th Street, notice that the demolition has occurred. Those houses and apartments and upholstery shop are gone. It's now an empty lot. And the plan is to put some parking space in there, put our community garden. We got that $10,000 from Sprouts, but we will need some infrastructure there in terms of irrigation and stuff. We plan to put some temporary storage over there, and then what we're calling a multi-purpose sports platform because the basketball court in the parking lot downstairs has resulted in 2 broken windshields last spring. So the kids are not allowed to be out there right now, and we really would love some outdoor space. So we're not looking to develop that into a building anytime soon, but really looking to make it functional in terms of outdoor community space that students can use. And lots of other organizations as well. It really is becoming a partnership in terms of designing that space with Garfield Middle School, who might use the garden as well, and just some other organizations. So super excited about that. So I'm asking the legislature for $500,000 in capital outlay to support that project. And I'm also asking for what they call grow money, which is operational money. It's a little harder to get, but we've built some really strong relationships up there. So why not ask? All they can do is give it to somebody else. Thank you, Diane. So just an update on there. Chris Pauls, I do believe I saw you come on the call. Is that correct? You're the other iPhone? Chris Pauls? I might come back to this because I'm not going to present it. Chris Pauls is, but just really briefly, when Chris comes back, this board, the members can remember that. Are you there, Chris? I saw you come off mute. Maybe not. So we've been contracting with CNR Enterprises to manage this facility, and this board approved a proposition last March for Ricardo Baca to hire my husband to do some of that maintenance work. The relationship with CNR is deteriorating. We haven't been really happy with those services. And so we're in the process of dissolving that contract. Chris Pauls, who's the administrator at the Northworth campus for the high school, and our receptionist, MJ Johnson, Maria Johnson, who's fairly new, have decided that they can handle facility management. And so they're going to team that. We are giving MJ a stipend to do that. And they would like to continue using my husband for some of that maintenance stuff. And so there's a proposal and a management plan to mitigate any conflict of interest, but it does require board approval because of the relationship. And so I'll give you one more chance. Chris, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. I'm so sorry.
Awesome.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, please jump in and take over.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. My AirPods are sometimes tricky with Zoom. The microphone doesn't work. So I was unmuted, but you couldn't hear me. We have been, Miguel was hired through Ricardo to do some maintenance tasks and to do janitorial work for us. And we're really happy with the job that he's done, even though it didn't work out with Ricardo in terms of managing the facility as a whole. And there's several things that I think are really advantageous about having Miguel in there. One of them is that it's really been difficult for us over the years to have someone really take ownership of maintaining the janitorial services of the building. And Miguel has, really done that. I mean, he started off with a bang by reorganizing a lot of things, but he's really continued that and gone above and beyond frequently. He's also really available to me, which is nice. I can just reach out to him through text and he's really responsive. And that's really helpful because in the past with management agencies, they just haven't been as responsive. He does extra tasks like polishing the floors and things like that and keeping them well cleaned. So in the past, the floors have gotten really grimy and gross because the custodial staff don't mop, but Miguel has been really good about keeping up with that. And then I think it's also been really helpful for him to be available to do handyman tasks. And so he's helped out with, some HVAC things and other issues like hanging Promethean boards, stuff like that. So it's kind of a win-win for us. And I hope it works out to keep him. And yeah, that's sort of my stance on it. I hope that helps.
The proposal is, since we're dissolving the relationship with CNR, to hire my husband directly. It does not require a change in policy. We clipped the policy that was passed in 2021. This is the policy that we purchased directly from our legal counsel. And so, but it does require, because of the connection to me, a board approval to hire him directly. And in the, you know, as has been the case with Ricardo and will continue to be the case, I would not be involved in any of the management plan, all the oversight, all the assignment, all the evaluation, the communication, performance reviews, all of that would fall to Chris. And I would continue to sign a formal conflict of interest declaration moving forward. So during our audits, I would disclose that I am director and he is an employee. And if the board approves it, then we could move forward in that way. I do want to acknowledge that if the board does not approve that, it's not going to cause any hardship between my husband and I. We certainly, as a school, have other options. I agree with Chris Pauls that we've been receiving really excellent services, but I just did want to acknowledge that he's well aware that this might not get passed, and that would be okay as well. So I don't know if anyone else has any questions, or if Chris, you want to add anything to that.
No, I really appreciate you covering the stuff about managing Miguel. I had forgotten to mention that those are going to be separate.
I thank you both for providing that information to the board. It's very comprehensive, and as you noted, Beth, it's pre-existing policies that are in place to have us either approve or disapprove, and so that is on our action items as well. Any other questions or comments? Okay, then we will go ahead and should we go directly to that action item? Typically when we have kind of related things that we've reported on, we've gone to the action item just so it's fresh in our minds.
Sure.
Okay, let's go ahead and do that then. So do I have a motion to approve the management plan for Miguel Dorado?
I motion to approve the management plan.
Thank you, Jody. Do I have a second?
A second.
Thank you, Deb. Do I have all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so we have approved the management plan for Miguel Dorado.
Thank you, thank you. Moving right along, this stays the same in every director's report every month, but I do want to acknowledge that I link the Monday morning memos. I send out a weekly communication to staff. I do try to streamline communication to them, and I think that there's a lot of things as you're reviewing files and documents that I send out prior to this meeting. You're welcome to check that out, because sometimes there's really important stuff in there that I forget to tell you. And likewise, you'll see in every Monday morning memo after a meeting, I post my director's report for them to review. So it's really just another example of trying to be transparent with communication. So there's that. I do have several policies to talk about today that are also action items. One is a policy that was approved in the September meeting. If you remember, in September, we reviewed a new policy that outlined how we put new staff members on the salary schedule. And so PED every couple of years audits how we're doing that. And we're anticipating we're on this year's audit, because I've never been to one, and it's year 4, so I'm assuming it's coming. And so it's been an interesting to hear how other charter schools are faring in that audit. So in preparation, Sammy and I just wanted to revisit the policy that we had on hand. You did pass this in September. It's not deja vu, but the problem in September was that we did not have this sentence in the policy that you approved. And so again, this policy is breaking down what type of documentation we accept in terms of years of experience. It breaks down whose responsibility is to get that documentation. It provides some dates. The only thing difference between the one that you already approved in September and the one that's before you now is the addition of the sentence that I've highlighted. We are giving credit to staff members who may have worked 60 to 99 days. We're giving them a half a year, but we don't do half-year salary schedule jumps. We only do a full year of salary schedule jumps. And so the sentence that we're adding is, as the salary schedule only recognizes full years, a half-year credit will only be accepted if it can be combined with another half-year credit to make a full year. And so we often have people who've worked part-time or who've worked half a year, and if they have two of those or more, they can combine them to move up on the salary scale, but we can't give them credit for just a half a year. And so that's the change in this policy from the one that you saw and approved in September. Martha, you want me to switch to the action item like we typically do?
Yeah,
Or do you
let's
want
go
me-
ahead and do that.
Okay.
Do I have any comments or questions on that update to the policy?
Oops.
And I think that was also a good catch of making sure it's very clear to staff and if PED reviews that. Do I have a motion to approve the revised training and experience verification policy?
I'll motion to approve the revised training and experience verification policy.
Thank you, Sabah. Do I have a second?
I will second.
Oh, I heard Jody, so I'll have Jody for the second and then all in favor.
Aye.
Thank you. We have approved the revised training and experience verification policy.
All right, I have a new policy that you haven't seen yet. So this is an internal attendance tier shift. And so I'd like to take just a few minutes to explain attendance tiers. The public education department over the last several years, I'm not sure exactly when they started it. Every year that I've been director, I've had to submit an attendance intervention plan. And so what the state is having us do is track absences. And as students increase their percentage of absences, to have an increase in the interventions that we provide. And so they being PED, I apologize, here we go. They being PED categorizes students into 4 tiers. And so this top table that we're looking at is how PED categorizes students. So students that are 95% present in their classes are considered tier 1. They're fully engaged. And so they do, we identify students in that way. PED identifies tier 2 when students are 5 to 9% absent. And then what our intervention has been to check in during our MLSS or our SAT meetings and have the advisor talk to a student. Tier 3, PED identifies when they're 10 to 19%. And at that point, we have a social worker get involved. And then over 20%, PED classifies that, categorizes that as chronically absent and requires a tier 4 intervention. And that's when Chris Pauls or Chris, we're looking at the Northforth policy here, or Chris Cazone get involved with an attendance contract. And then when that contract is broken is when we drop students. What we're suggesting is new tiers internally. We cannot change the way PED categorizes our students. This policy will not change the way that our chronically absenteeism rates are reported at the state level on our Vistas platform or anything like that. But what it does is it allows us internally to categorize students a little bit differently. And let me explain why. Our staff by campus meet every Friday morning and talk about students. And so one of the things that they talk about is who's in a new tier. And what happens is PED elevates our students through these tiers fairly rapidly. So they're already getting interventions when we're just barely trying to get to know them and re-engage with them. And so what we're suggesting, again, it will not change our data at the state level, but internally, we don't want to identify them as a tier 2, a tier 3, or a tier 4 student until they're absent a lot more. And you might think, well, why is that? Why would that matter? We consider ourselves a re-engagement school. The average student that joins Gordon Burnell has been out of school for 3 years. That's the average time that it's been. And we don't have them coming in every single day. We actually do attendance based on an engagement. And so you can see that a little bit further down. What those different do we have? How we do attendance, we might not. That's been something that's passed. Oh, yeah, here we go. Here's how we do attendance, right? It's not, are you in class for first period, second period, third period, fourth period, because we don't have periods. But what we're tracking for attendance is, have you checked in with your advisor this week? Have you set and met a goal with your advisor this week? Have you attended a class? Have you actually attended something in person this week? And have you made progress in a course? Have you actually progressed? Have you turned things in? And so we, at the end of the week, and I can actually, well, it might take me longer, but I was going to show you, we have checks where all week long teachers and staff members and advisors are checking off. Students did this, student did that. And at the end of the week, we submit that data to PED. PED is still going to classify students based on their numbers, but what we want to do is wait a little bit longer and give students a chance to re-engage, to trust us, to show up. And so they practiced it this week. They only brought up students using these percentages instead of the percentages proposed by PED. And instead of staff going, no, that's not true, they were like, yeah, that's an unengaged student. It matched more our expectation for engagement. So again, you passing this policy is not going to change our data at the state level. It's not going to change how we report to the state, but it will shift how we intervene, especially at this campus. And what it does is allow students a little more time and just ability to settle in and to engage.
Hey, Beth, can I jump in on that a little bit?
Please do. So glad. Thank you, Chris.
Of course. I was actually going to say a lot of what you already said, but the genesis of this occurred because we had a huge number of tier 4 students by the state standards. Sorry, I got something stuck in my throat. Oh my goodness. And so at an MLSS meeting, I brought up all those students and the staff was like, no, that student's engaged, but they were listed as a tier 4. And so when we ran the new protocols, as Beth pointed out, the staff were much more like, yeah, that sounds a lot more accurate. So like the tier 4s really were disengaged students, and the tier 3s really were students that needed Jake to reach out to them, the social worker. And the tier 2 students really were students who just needed their advisors to say, hey, you're on our radar, you need to pick it up. So I feel like it was a really worthwhile experiment, and it really more accurately reflects which of our students are engaged or unengaged. I hope that helps.
Any thoughts or questions or concerns about this policy? Again, it's just internally that we're changing. The PED won't change those.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing. I think that brings a lot of needed context to this. I do wonder, in terms of, like you said, they're still measuring us by different standards, and that's still going to be the data that's reflected. Another thing that we're reviewing today is the credit acquisition guidelines that we had to kind of go back and review because we had different measures, and the state came back and said, okay, no, we do still need to look at SAT. And so I wonder is this going to be a similar case of PED coming back to us and saying, well, you still can't have your own measures of kind of attendance levels. Do you anticipate any of that kind of pushback, or?
I certainly wouldn't be surprised by it, Martha. I mean, I think that it makes, there's a constant kind of push between re-engagement schools. They used to be called, at one point, PED recognized a cohort of schools, including Gordon Burnell, as what they called a SAM school. A school, that SAM standed for a school with, what did SAM stand for? Accountability measures? Something different, what would
Maybe
the
student
S?
accountability measures?
It
or-
was not separate accountability measures, but they, at one point, the PED recognized a cohort of schools that should be measured differently. And they were called SAM schools. And I don't remember what SAM stands for, but there was this real nod from the state, like, yeah, we shouldn't be measuring you with the same measuring stick that we're measuring more traditional schools, because you are re-engaging students. And so the measurements should be different. There was pushback to the state at the federal level that all, because of Every Student Succeeds Act, that all schools must be measured on the same stick. And so the state is grappling with how to accurately measure SAM schools or schools like Gordon Burnell. We're certainly not the only one. There are lots of schools across the state who are dedicated to working with students who fall outside of the box, who don't fit in a circle, square peg because they're circles, or however that phrase goes. So I think the state's grappling with it as well. They want to be supportive, and they also have pressure from the feds to be standardized in a lot of ways. And I kind of think that it is part of, I see it as a responsibility of schools like ours to be constantly pushing that envelope a little bit, and not just to accept it and be like, oh, well, that's what we have to do. But to say, well, no, actually, students who are here 20%, who are here 80% of the time, are doing great. Like, if we think, so if you look at our, I'll go back to our tiers, but if you look at our tiers, you know, they want us to say that a student who's absent 20% is chronically absent. And we're saying a student who's absent 23% isn't even on our radar yet. That a student who's showing up 8 out of 10 days, that's 4 out of 5 days a week, is brilliant, is managing to re-engage with school, right? And that's exactly what we want. And so to your point, Martha, the state could come back and push back on this. And I would be willing to say, well, the board agreed that our students, you know, are at 80% are amazing. And when they're only coming 50%, really need to be on a contract, really need to be doing, we really need to be thinking about having conversations with them about whether this is, if they're able to do school right now, or if they need to come back when they have ability to give more than they are right now. And so, you know, I don't think that anybody is reviewing this in the same ways that they are. There's not funding attached to this. The reason I think we got the pushback around the dash is because there was federal dollars attached to it. And anytime there's money involved, there's certainly a lot more documentation. So if I had to place a bet, I would say that we don't get any pushback on this, but I certainly could lose that bet. And it would be one that I would be willing to justify and to fight for a little bit, because as a re-engagement student, a student who's here 80% of the time is killing it in our eyes. So I don't know if that answers your question, Martha, but.
Oh, I have a question.
Yes.
Oh, hey, Beth, I just was gonna say, SAM School is student achievement measure.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. And, you know, it's really about looking at the data for students who are returning or part-time students, which exactly is our demographic. As Beth pointed out, you know, our students on average have been out of school for 3 years, and many of our students by default are part-time because they have complicated lives. You know, many of them have children, they have jobs, they have family obligations, and so they're not day in, day out students, but that doesn't mean they're not engaged. You know, many of our students come every other week, but they're deeply engaged in the school. They're just not engage in a way that looks traditional, if that makes sense.
So Beth, the pushback, we're still having to turn the data in
Mhm.
the way they want it. So what would the pushback be, that they would expect you to drop a child?
That they would expect those interventions
Right, but-
to escalate at a much faster rate than we want them to.
And if we don't drop the student when they want us to, is that where the pushback would happen? Because I don't know where they would check in otherwise.
I mean, yeah, I think, yes, we do, we won't consider dropping a student until they've maxed out at tier 4.
Right.
And so there could be pushback that, that we're reporting numbers
Yeah, that are.
that may not be, as accurate, but those are students who are engaged, and PED says, when they push out the intervention plans, this is not about dropping students out. The interventions are not meant to drop students. The interventions are meant to re-engage them. And so I could argue that as well. I mean, we really do follow the rule of, if we are out of contact with a student, no matter where they are, if we're completely out of contact, they're gonna move up that tier pretty quickly. And will get dropped. So, I mean, there could be pushback.
That's the only place I can see the pushback happening.
Yep.
Is if they wanted you to drop students, which really makes no sense. But otherwise, we're reporting the data the way it is, so I can't think. I, as a board member, think that we can approve this without worrying about their pushback, because I can't imagine what pushback would look like that there would be any problem for our school.
Great. Yeah, I just kind of wanted to dig into that and acknowledge, that difference. Just also with the knowledge that because of the difference with DASH reporting, we are making an adjustment there. So I guess just more of like transparently, we can be open to having to make adjustments in the future should there be an issue at PED. But I also agree that it makes a lot of sense for our particular population school model to have the attendance listed differently internally. And with the knowledge that if PED does have an issue, they will bring it to us, and then we can address the issue as a board and school. Any other questions or comments on this policy?
I actually had a question, Martha.
Sure.
Beth, I don't know, I don't have enough of an understanding, right? So that's why I'm asking these questions, but who defines what the interventions are? Like, is that where there's some flexibility, where you guys have your modification, but can you make interventions look different internally, or do you have to follow what's put out by the state, or is anything standardized and put out by the state?
Excellent question, Charmaine. And actually, the interventions are at the school level. And so when we submit an attendance intervention plan, that's what they're asking us for, is what are the interventions at these different tiers? And so the interventions that we have, nothing at tier 1, advisor and discussion in our weekly meeting at tier 2, reaching out by the social worker at tier 3, and engaging in an attendance contract at tier 4. Those are internally set for Gordon Burnell and at all schools. And so we certainly got to determine what those interventions are. And as does every school when they submit their attendance intervention plan to PED.
Okay, thank you.
Good question.
Any other questions or comments? Okay. Let's go ahead to our action item then. Do I have a motion to approve the internal attendance tier benchmarks policy?
I move that we approve our internal attendance benchmark policy.
Thank you, Deb. A second?
I second that.
Thank you, Sabah. All in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
All right, one last policy.
We
And
have
then
approved the attendance policy.
my apologies, Martha. Thank you.
That's okay. I had a little space in between two.
Last policy up for consideration by the board this evening is our accountability assessment participation policy. So this is also a slight shift in compliance, if you will. There are, for high schools, there are 3 accountability assessments that students are asked to participate in. There are different types of assessments, right, within a school. And so just very broadly, we do assessments to understand short-term growth. So what we use the TABE for assessing students in reading and math when they first enroll in the school. And then we reassess to show growth after they complete credits and move through our program. There is what they call competency testing, which is testing that the school uses to demonstrate readiness for graduation. And so we require competency testing in all 5 subjects: reading, writing, math, science, and social studies. The state used to require that. The state no longer does. As an institution, we still do, because we have some flexibility in credit acquisition. We want to hold that competency benchmark standardized before graduation. So even though many public schools across the state are no longer doing graduation competency testing, we continue to. We're not talking about growth testing. We're not talking about competency testing. We're talking about accountability testing here. And so accountability testing is how the state largely evaluates us as a school, how our students do on these assessments. In high schools in the state of New Mexico, those assessments are the access assessment, which is given to all of our English language learning students. It tests language acquisition, language proficiency acquisition, and it's given annually. That's an accountability assessment, as well as a great assessment for just gauging the progress that our ELL students are making. We also, as a state, have adopted the SATs for reading and math. Not a good fit for our population. We are not preparing students to take the SAT. It's just not on our radar, but it's how we are held accountable in terms of proficiency rates. And then we also give the NMASR, which is a science readiness assessment. And similarly, not the best fit for our students, but it is the accountability assessment that we're required to give. So in high schools, in elementary and middle school, students take these assessments every year. In high schools, they only take them as juniors. So our juniors represent our entire student body and a large part of how our school is evaluated against other schools across the state. We are certainly down to be compliant. We administer these assessments. Really, the only thing that is of interest here is this phrase right here. This is the one that I am asking for permission for. There's a lot of words here. It is notable that we will not identify students to take this assessment until the 1/20th reporting date. That does not fall outside of PED policy, but it does make it, the reason that we really want to stress that is because only 11th grade scores count, and not 11th graders today, 11th graders when the assessment is given. And so we struggle to identify because our students, credit recovery, accelerated learning, we're reporting credits weekly, right? And so we should note that we're not identifying and preparing students until mid-February for these tests. But that is not out of line with PED policy. That's when they identify them too. But just wanting to note that. What is outside a little bit of PED policy and why I'm bringing it to the board is I lost it. Exemption for some students out at MDC. We out at MDC, if you remember, our high school students fall into 2 categories. If they can, they're moved into a school pod, which means that they live in an area close to our classrooms. They leave their housing unit to come to school. So they leave the pod, they walk across the hall, they enter a classroom. In those classrooms, we have computers, we have Wi-Fi. We can create an acceptable testing environment in which we feel confident is fair for tests that caliber the SATs or the NMASR. But that's only about half of our high school students. The other half of high school students, about 25 of them out at the jail, are not eligible to move into the school pod. They have co-defendants in there. They have keepaways in there. They're in the medical ward. They're in the psychiatric ward. They are having disciplinary problems at the jail and are in restrictive housing units. They can't come to the school pod, but they are still eligible to be in our school. Our staff go to them. And so when we heard from Shayna earlier, she said she spends several days in the classroom and she spends several days going out to meet with students. We feel confident that we're providing them the services that they need, but there is no way to create a testing environment. There is no classroom. This is teachers literally sitting in a room with 30 to 40 other inmates. It is loud, it is noisy, it is sometimes a teacher doing work at a door, talking through like someone who's, on suicide watch is behind a door, someone who is, and so there's just no way to do these standardized assessments. The jail is not going to give us permission to take them to the classroom. If they were, they'd be in the classroom and not in these other areas. So this does affect our participation rate. APS is aware of this, PED is aware of this, but we didn't have a policy that really stated this. And so I'm not worried because again, everyone's aware and they go, oh yeah, when it comes up, because they do push. Why are your participation lows? Why is your participation rate low? And I say, well, I can't test those 7 students because I can't. And it was just brought to our attention actually by PED that we should have a policy on file that states that. So that's what this is. It's a policy that talks about the assessments that are accountability assessments, how we identify them, how we administer them. And then really the only piece that is different from what PED is expecting is this idea that students outside of the school pods, we just can't. Just not possible. So there's that.
Thank you for that explanation, Beth. Are there any questions or comments on that new policy? Okay. Yeah, and I think this was several years ago. I also had my little rant around using SAT as a graduation requirement. So we don't need to go back there, but I wholeheartedly agree with Beth that not just for Gordon Burnell, but for many schools across New Mexico, the SAT is not the greatest measure for graduating students. Anyway, regardless, any other questions, comments on this before we move to approval? All right. So do I have a motion to approve the accountability assessment policy?
I move to motion that we accept the accountability process.
Thank you, Jody. Do I have a second?
I second.
Okay, I heard Deb first. Thank you for that second, and then all in favor.
Hi.
Aye.
Right, we have approved the accountability assessment policy.
All right. Oh, this one, sorry, guys. This has been on your agenda 2, 3, 4 times this semester. And then every time we get to it, I go, oh, I need to table that. I finally decided to focus on progress instead of perfection. And so I actually am not tabling this. And with the caveat that there is still some work to be done here. So just a kind of some context, when in 2021, you were a fairly new board. I was certainly a new director, and we inherited binders. My predecessors were really into binders. And so all of the board policies, the resolutions, the things that had been passed over the many years the school had been in operation were very neatly organized in binders. And so a couple years ago, I took all of those binders and I scanned them into a variety of documents and kind of just different ways to think about this. Essentially, What I'd like to do, and I've shared this with you before, I have a spreadsheet with every policy that the board has ever passed. Several years ago, I did go through them and made sure that they were all represented in our current handbooks, our employee handbook and our student handbook specifically. But then we had these employee handbooks that were like 150 pages long. So the work that I've been doing now is in really creating a third document, which is our operations manual. And so just to kind of think about how this works, the process that I'd like to continue is this. The operations manual is super long. It has all of the policies in their original state that were passed by the board or adopted from the lawyer. Oh, it got mad at me. I was scrolling too fast, and now it went blank. It's many, many hundreds of pages long. It has all of our policies fully represented. And what I'm trying to do then is keep our employee handbook and our student handbook just a quick summary of those documents. So not that so that we're not going through all the legalese that the lawyer provided us about how we terminate people or how people create a grievance, but we're just saying there's processes for doing this, and you can review the full process in the operations manual, and here's like a couple sentences explaining it. Because my hope is that our handbooks then become digestible and become things that people actually read. Because when you open a handbook and it's 100 pages, you go, whatever. Do you know what I mean? And you don't even bother. And in some ways, that's okay. It's a reference, but I really want the operations manual to be the reference where those originals can be found and reviewed and open to the public. So once we get these, we'll rearrange what's on the website. We'll have a link to the operations manual. It won't be hidden. But really trying to condense the handbook so that they become digestible by people who need to utilize them. And then my hope is that annually we'll look at all of the new policies that you guys passed and make sure that those are incorporated not only in the operations manual in their full splendor, but also mentioned in the appropriate handbook so that people are up to date on the policies that are governing the school. So all of that to say, since we last adopted handbooks, the chart that I'm sharing right now are the 10 policies that the board passed since summer of 2023 to now late fall of 2024, because I kept tabling this because it was overwhelming to me. But again, focusing on progress, not perfection. I can come back to this another 6 months or another year and do another version of it, right? So these are the policies that you've passed in about a year's time. We passed another 2 today. We updated 1, but another 2 today. And so I just noticed, is this a board policy? Should this be reflected in the student handbook? Should this be reflected in the employee handbook? I did pull out a pathway to graduation guide out of the student handbook because I wanted, again, I want these to be tools that we're actually using with students, and a 50-page student handbook that no one was looking at it. So now I have a 5-page, how do you get credits? How do you do the tests? So I just want to acknowledge that we pulled the pathway to graduation out of the student handbook, and we're going to post it and use it as a separate document. And then I did do some just kind of consolidation to the handbooks, and I tried to make it very clear what that was. So in the student handbook, I certainly made sure that the 3 policies that you passed over the past year were in there. And then I also just did things like, we don't have a campus at Workforce in New Mexico, so I took that out. We added a table of contents, that wasn't there. I took out some language about COVID-related guidelines because they're no longer applicable. The CDC is now treating COVID like the flu and just suggesting that when people are sick, they stay home until their fever is gone, right? But we're not tracking it and recording it the way that we were in a previous iteration. And then I removed some language around administration. So I just tried to really, if I made a change, I noted it in this table. And then throughout, I did make some general edits. I would change a phrase or caught a typo, but certainly nothing that changed content, and you can certainly look at the last version to this one. Similarly, in the employment handbook, I made sure that there were all of the policies that you passed were noted in there. The employee handbook is where I did a bunch of summarizing, right? So you'll note, like on page 5, there used to be like 4 pages of legalese provided by the lawyer about anti-harassment section. And I maintained all that complete policy in the operations manual, but in the handbook itself, I just said, a lot shorter of a summary. And you can see that on page 5. So again, I made several changes to these handbooks. I can talk about them line by line if that's helpful to the board. I can answer questions. But really what I'm looking to do is to have the operations manual with the full history of all of our policies and procedures, and more digestible and usable handbooks and tools that we can use with new staff members and with students. And happy to answer questions, but also realizing where we are in time. So I'm gonna stop talking for a minute and see what you guys think.
Well, first, I'm just gonna give kudos to Beth for undertaking this huge amount of work. I think it's amazing to be able to have this level of both organization and transparency. So I know that you've had this on your list for a long time, so I'm sure it'll feel very good to just sort of say, all right, we got this part done. And then as we continue to pass policies, that will on occasion update those different handbooks. So definitely applause to you for getting that together. Any questions or comments about that?
I just want to echo what you're saying, Martha, about giving kudos to Beth, because that is some amazing and thorough work that is definitely there. So thank you for sharing that with us, because we learned so much just today as well.
All
Happy
right.
to talk about any of the particular changes, but I really tried to outline page by page what is different, and in hopes that you had a chance to review that before the meeting.
Yeah. All right. Do I have a motion to approve the credit acquisition? Or no, sorry, we have several things. We did that one already. Do I have a motion to approve the updated student handbook?
I'll move that we approve the updated student handbook.
Do I have a second?
I'll
I second.
Thank you, Charmaine. All in favor?
All right.
Great. We have approved the updated student handbook. And do I have a motion to approve the updated employee handbook?
I motion to approve the updated employee handbook.
Thank you, Charmaine. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Deb. All in favor?
Aye.
Great. We have approved the updated employee handbook. And then just to double check, Beth, we did already do the credit acquisition guideline. That's correct. You had just kind of highlighted the 3 together.
Yeah, I pulled
Or-
it, we haven't approved it in this meeting yet. I mentioned that I pulled it out of the student handbook. It is now
I see.
its own document. And so I do think it should be approved as its own document, because it does kind of outline credit acquisition and a pathway. I'm trying to look for it so I can pull it up, because it's
Yeah, it
actually
might be good if we view
Yeah,
that
this
really
one.
quickly.
Let's look at this one. There we go. There it is. Because there are some shifts long-term in here from things that have happened over the last couple of years. So it's the first page is our graduate profile. I'm trying to make it a little smaller so we can see it all on one page. But our beautiful graduate profile, which we worked on over a long period of time and adopted early last year. So this guides conversations and outlines the skills that we think that are important for not only but we as a community, because we had a lot of input in creating this. But with the skills and knowledge that we hope that students have when they graduate. So it starts with our graduate profile, beautiful artwork done by students as well. It goes into graduation requirements. Again, these are about to change. This is still PED guidance. Last legislative session, they updated the credit requirements, but then they kind of made a mess of a few things. So PED hasn't offered any guidance on it yet, and it doesn't go into effect still for another year. But we are expecting some changes in this. We know they're in the pipeline, and we do expect the legislators to maybe make some adjustments this year so that it's a little easier for PED to provide the guidance. Things like they're still requiring financial literacy as a math credit, but they're also requiring personal finance as a social studies credit. And there's a lot of questions about that. So these are graduation requirements, course-wise, that have been in play for many years. They're about to change, but they're still in place for this year. The competency, again, PED is no longer requiring competency for graduation, but as an organization at the local level, we are. And that is because some of our credit is credit recovery. It's quick, it's filling in the gaps, and we just don't
No worries,
graduate
thanks.
people without being able to really demonstrate the competency in a standardized way. So we do use ACT work keys as our graduation assessments. And that's not changed in quite some time. But this is kind of just a breakdown that you need 24 course credits and you need 5 competencies in order to graduate. We link in the standards that our ELA and math curriculum is based on. We did a lot of that work last year with our expiring ESSER funds. So super excited about that. We do have a flow chart here on how you get placed into courses based on that assessment at enrollment. And then noting that if you tabe into elective courses, you got to tabe into your core courses. So we're really trying to build those foundational skills even before students are eligible to earn core credit. Sometimes they have some skill building to do. They've been out of school for a long time. And then we have a similar chart for how you get placed as a math student based on that initial assessment and how you progress through it. We are offering some competency-based credits. And so this is, kind of a balance between acknowledging that students come to us with a great amount of knowledge. And if they meeting certain benchmarks at a level 4, then we're just like, great, we don't need to spend a lot of time earning that credit. You've demonstrated it. And now let's earn that additional credit. So this is just a piece really focused on that accelerated learning that we know is important. We often have a 19, 20, 21-year-old student and join us and with very few credits, and our intention is certainly to grow them, but not necessarily to keep them for 3 or 4 years in high school. It is really to make sure that they have the skills that they need to move into those next steps, into the workforce or into higher ed. And so wanting to acknowledge that if you come in with some pretty high skills, we want to acknowledge that right off the bat. So that's this competency-based credit acquisition piece, not new to our school, but something that we've been negotiating over the last couple of years, the best way for it to fit. A quick just note that there are capstone projects, career pathways, ways that people can earn credits, and then a nod to individual learning plans. But wanting to keep this really short, again, digestible, they can go to the student handbook for lots more information, but this is just kind of the highlights. And so it is a new document, and wanting to make sure that you guys if you have questions, you're able to ask them.
Thank you for going over that, Beth. I thought it was important for us to kind of take a quick look at that before approving. And sorry about not being muted. I'm not used to like people coming in, in and out of my space. I will say now being on the teaching side of adult ed, that I very much appreciated the flow charts of how students progress and earn credits. And that is not something that we have here. So I might also be taking examples. So I really appreciate having this outline and hope that it will help students and staff and community as well see how the students are progressing. Any questions or comments on the credit acquisition guideline?
Beth, do you have a sense of like how well the majority of students as they go through understand the process that they're in, like the credit acquisition process and basically what's laid out in the handbook? Do you have a good sense of like how much students are like understanding that and how long it takes them to grasp it?
It's a challenge, and therefore the real decision to pull out this information into just a couple of pages. The hope, Sabah, idealistically, theoretically, is that these conversations are happening when students write their individualized learning plans, that these are the types of conversations that advisees and advisors are engaged in. And then you have the reality, right? That a student hasn't been here, going back to our attendance tier, and they're coming every other week and they show up to meet with their advisor right when their advisor is in an IEP or is in the middle of a direct instruction lesson. And so unfortunately, I think that not as many students as we hope have the grasp that we want them to have. And so that your question exactly, Sabah, is kind of the motivation behind pulling out a separate document, creating these flow charts, pulling it out of a 50-page student handbook and having just a 5-page pamphlet that we hope we can give to students and we can have available in all the classrooms, almost laminated, right? So that during conversations, it can be referred to. My hope is that with this document that general understanding by students goes up. That's the intention behind it. I think that generally students, once they commit to the school, and so I think at first it's overwhelming. They've been out of school for 3 years. It doesn't look like school. There's not a first period bell and a second period bell, and they don't get a schedule that says I'm in New Mexico history and then I go to English. And so it's tricky, it's hard, and it is a challenge to make sure that students really understand and engage in the process of writing an individualized learning plan and understanding how they progress. I think that, pretty quickly though, once students like, oh, I earned a credit? Tell me more. They do catch on. And especially the ones that understand it are the ones that we really see start to make big progression, because they're like, oh, if I do this, this, and this, right, then I get to go to that next spot on the flow chart. So, I would say generally students who have been with the school for at least a quarter get it and can talk to you about it. And my hope is that we can bring about that understanding quicker. And so hence the development of this particular document, so that advisors also have a tool for engaging these conversations as well.
Yeah. And to your point, Sabah, I'm in that learning curve like right now, because there are various different tests that adult ed learners are taking and various scores that they have to reach in order to kind of progress to the next level or be able to take an official test. And then what is the passing score for that test? And so it does look, there are lots of terms that if you're not familiar with those particular tests and the scores, it looks very complicated. So that's probably what you were like referencing of like, whoa, there's all these numbers and things. And so it does take a little bit of time with students and others in general of learning of like, well, what is that test and why would I want to be scoring at this before I'm able to move on? So that's part of it. And Beth, if you just want to add, like, there probably isn't an easier way of simplifying it for students. So that's why it just takes maybe a little bit of time for them to learn the system.
We're hopeful that these new visuals help, right? These are new flow charts. And so ask again next quarter, Savan. Let's see if we're feeling like this document has helped. Because that is exactly the intention behind it, was how do we guide these conversations between advisors and advisees so that it doesn't feel like a hit or miss or something that is not understandable.
Yeah. Any other questions or comments? Okay, do I have a motion to approve the credit acquisition guidelines?
A motion to approve the credit acquisition guidelines. Sorry, I can't talk.
Sorry, thank you, Jody. A second.
A second.
Thank you, Charmaine. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we have approved the credit acquisition guidelines.
So that does conclude all of our action items, but we still have a whole section around academics. I do acknowledge the time. We typically finish by 5 and rarely go past 5:30. But we did not have an October meeting, and so we've got some carryover there. So I know that this board has particularly recognized a desire to spend more time in the academic performance framework section, and really understanding student data and what it tells us and how the school is responding is one of the priorities that the board identified in some of its strategic planning. So my apologies for rushing through this. I acknowledge that this is important to the board. I'm happy to spend time on it today. I'm happy to spend time on it with individuals who want to dive into it more if we don't go into as much depth as you would like. And I'm certainly happy to return to it in future meetings in more depth when we have less of the compliance and handbooks and type things on the agenda. But essentially, let me kind of share some of the things that are here. I actually had more in this section, and when I went to work on it, I saved some things for the December report because I was just like, this is ridiculous and I can't do it anymore right now. But I did want to bring up some really important pieces. I shared a presentation with you around Navajo Nation tribal consultation that occurred on the 8th of November. We do average between 15 and 25% of our students as identifying as Native American. We do receive funding to support our Indigenous students, and about 65% of our Indigenous students are Navajo. So we have been in tribal consultation with Navajo Nation. This is our 4th year, and they are an actually really supportive group, and I enjoy that process. I know it can be difficult for some districts, but I find them really helpful. So I shared my presentation with you, and it's got a lot of data in it. So I threw it in this academic performance framework section. I also shared with you, we are preparing for our fall site visits with APS, and there's a lot of data that we look at in terms of last year's data when it comes to our fall site visit. The APS is triaging their site visits and their work with schools this year. APS, I think this may be an old number because there are schools who are switching authorizers all over the place, but they typically more recently have had around 30 charter schools that APS works with. They used to require site visits the same for all schools, and now they're color coding us. So schools who are have performed well over the years are down to annual visits. Schools that they're a little more worried about are yellow, and they get biannual visits. There are schools that are orange that are getting quarterly visits, and there are schools that APS has concerns about that are red that are getting monthly visits from the charter team at APS. We are a green school because we work really hard to make sure that our data is available to them and that we're meeting all of their compliance pieces. So we will do a desk audit this fall and then a site visit in the spring with APS. So I am preparing, it says fall site visit, it's really only a desk audit. So I'll be submitting a whole bunch of data and documents to the charter team at APS, and then looking forward to visiting with them in person in the spring. And so most notable in that work is the academic targets table, which is just charting our progress on the SAT, which is hard because who's an 11th grader? These numbers bounce all over the place. I don't find much value in them, but we're graded on them or evaluated on them. And so we report them and we are compliant in administering them. So there's the SAT in ELA, the SAT in math, the SAT and the NMASR in science. We're also tracking our internal proficiency data. We find that we are hoping that students are at the 9th grade level in reading and the 7th grade level in math. That does prepare them to do well enough on the GED. believe it or not. And it does prepare them to enter apprenticeships. We hope students go much beyond that, but that's the proficiency levels that we're tracking for our population. So you can see those numbers are not trending well for us in math. So that's an interesting conversation to have. But I have been fairly consistent in reading over the years. We also track our students in terms of the career exploration and the career pathways work that they're doing, because we think that workforce development particularly important for our population. Career assessments, there's like the career exploration part. Career pathway is when, are they in internships? Are they doing job shadowing? Are they involved in those more intensive opportunities? Those numbers are trending beautifully, and we're really proud of that. A lot to do with our Career Development Center. We do track our mission-specific goals. So again, all of our students set a semester goal on their individualized learning plan, and we're tracking the percentage of students that meet their own goals. And then we're also tracking how students are doing with their self-reported engagement with positive assets. So we have a survey that we administer when they first enroll, and then again before they graduate. So that's a smaller sample because we're not surveying students all of the time, but the hypothesis is the more they're involved in, the more resilient they become. And so that SCR is loosely based on the 40 developmental assets, which is a well-recognized resiliency scale. And so we're pretty much, you know, do you do creative things? Do you do exercise things? Are you in touch with your family? Do you belong to any clubs? And then the hope is that we encourage people to get involved in things here, and that encourages them to stay involved with positive assets that can help them as their life progresses. Just really wanted to make a quick, just a note, so on Thursday mornings, we have a boxer who comes from Jackson MMA Acoma. He comes and he does a calisthenic, punching and kicking type thing, right, with students. They love it. He's got a large group that involved with him on Thursday mornings. And I caught him in the parking lot. He was here today, and he was, he had some equipment, and I was like, Nick, I haven't seen you in a while. It's good to see you. And he said, oh, I just wanted to let you know, we're up to 7 of your students that are coming to night school, to the night classes at his gym. And I said, really? He said, yeah. He said, I've got them all. He said, I'm covering some of their costs. I'm doing a sliding scale with them, is essentially what he said. And so the idea that those students may not have checked a box that they were involved in something like boxing previously, but hopefully now through the school, they continue that relationship at a gym outside of school, and they have something to lean on when life gets tough. They can go to the gym, and that may be an asset that they may not have been engaged in before they were here. So that's the idea of the student engagement rubric. That's the hypothesis. Can we get them engaged in more positive things? And hopefully those positive engagements will be support systems as they move forward and continue to leave us. We also track our graduation rate. And so that data is in here. And I need to catch up before my desk audit, which is next week, and get our adult ed data in there as well. But I did want to share that with you. And those are important numbers that we can talk more about today and talk more about in future meetings as well. And then the very last thing, before I talk about the charter school, and just make sure if anybody wants to go, I have 2 things. So my second to last thing, I know it's super late, the DASH. So this was interesting. And I actually have a meeting on Monday with Priority School Bureau. What is her title? Elizabeth Peterson. She's the director of the Priority School Bureau. I have an appointment with her Monday afternoon at 3:30 because I'm flabbergasted by this. So just a quick reminder, the DASH is a platform where schools are asked to strategically plan based on data to make improvements to that data. I actually like the tool. We've used it now for several years. We doubled down to this year and really made it a collaborative effort. I have a fairly large strategic planning team. who is meeting regularly, who is doing root cause analysis, who is looking at data, and who is setting desired outcomes and setting critical action steps to meet those outcomes. We submitted our DASH to APS, who approved it in August. We had a visit from the PED's Priority School Bureau because of our designation. We are an MRI school because of our graduation rates. So we had a visit from PED in September in which they looked very deeply at our DASH and wrote an entire plan and report based on that. We've been meeting regularly to review those critical action steps. And then in October, I got a message, your CSI MRI funding, your request for reimbursements are on hold because your DASH is out of compliance. And I said, oh, that's weird. 4 months after it was approved and all this work has been done, happy to meet with somebody. I met with someone at the Priority School Board, and she pretty much said, because you're in designation, your goals have to be, we're going to improve the proficiency rates on the SAT. We're going to improve the proficiency rates on the SAT. We're going to improve the proficiency rates on the NMASAR. We're going to improve our graduation rate. And I got really mad at this nice, very nice woman. And I got dysregulated and I said, those things are not important to my students. They're not important to the families. They're not important to my staff. We're not doing that. I don't feel comfortable changing a plan that had a lot of community input. And I'm mad as can be. And she said, I'm going to take my hat off as a PED employee and talk to you as a person. I hear you. I have no authority to help you. Do you want this $129,000 or not? And I said, well, yeah, I already spent most of it because it was approved. And now I'm asking for the reimbursement. And she said, then swallow your pride and change it with me right now so you get the money and have your meetings later. And I went, thank you, ma'am. I don't know you. I appreciate you. Let me take a deep breath. And that woman and I rewrote our DASH over about 45 minutes and submitted it at the 11th hour to get that money reimbursed. I am not okay with this. I've made a lot of noise about this in lots of different places. I have a meeting on Monday, pretty high up in the Priority Schools Bureau because I just spent all day this week, Monday and Tuesday, at an MLS DASH training at Isleta put on by PED, where they just went on and on and on about how you take input and and all the things that we did. And when I raised my hand and said, but you undid all that, I got yelled at by presenters. I got shamed even on Monday. And so I shut my mouth, and Chris Cazzone with me. He said, just be quiet, Beth. And I was like, he's like, now's not the place. But I'm pretty fired up about this because strategic planning is supposed to be internal based on our goals. And if you can see our new DASH, what this very nice woman who worked with me literally at like 6 o'clock on a whatever night it was to rewrite this so we could get funding. What we did was we wrote revised goals above the work. She said, don't delete the work that you did. Take this to all the places. So they approved it with a revised goal, which says stuff like, by spring of 2025, 20% of, oh no, that's not the best one. The percentage of students at Gordon Burnell earning a score of proficient or higher in math as measured by the SAT will increase from 0% to 10%.
Did they set the amount? Because the reading one goes from 24% to like 30. I mean, it's over a 50% increase.
At that point, I let this woman put
Right,
whatever she wanted because she said, let's get your money.
Yeah.
And then you can take your fight where you need to. And I said, I appreciate that. I need this money. And so we have a new DASH. We submitted our 30-day or 60-day on our old goals, not on our new ones. And I don't know where this is one of those things, Martha, where I'm like, I'm okay with some pushback and I want to stand up. I am not the only one. There are other districts and schools who had this happen to them as well, who have voiced their frustration with the conflicting guidance that we're getting. And I just wanted to share with you that I don't know where this is going to go, but it is what's happening. So I don't know if anyone has any thoughts or questions about that, but that's where we're at with our strategic plan, our 90-day fall and soon to be 90-day spring dash.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that all, Beth. And I'm really sorry that you had to experience that, because that is a shock to, especially knowing how long it takes certain funding streams to get approved, and think that it had already been approved, because we don't spend money unless we know we're getting it. And so I just kind of also want to express that is not usual for them to then, walk it back when it had been approved so long ago. So I'm also grateful for the PED staff member who was able to work with you on that. And I also agree that, I believe it is a good place to push back and find ways to improve, because they are telling you one thing of like the individualized and community input when we had done all of that. And I know, especially based on the amount of data work you've been doing over the past couple of years with your staff and community input surveys, things like that goes into it, for it to just kind of, again, be based just on SAT scores is really, really frustrating. So I think that, board members, staff are all here to support you in that as we move forward. So please just keep us updated, and then also let us know how we can continue to support you in that. And I think that's also why I just brought it up around the attendance policies, is just knowing that, okay, even if they say one thing, we might get pushed back in other ways. So it wasn't to say we shouldn't do that, but just acknowledging, all right, we have to be ready for when they are going to come back at certain times. So any other questions or comments on the dash?
Go Beth.
Jen Pry at Gilbert Sena is as fired up as I am. And so, and the Public Charter Schools of New Mexico Coalition has heard and is willing to help us try to, they have a really good relationship with the department. And so, I'm hopeful that, with continued communication and just kind of, I want to dig my heels in a little bit, and I'm also willing to do what needs to be done. And so just kind of looking towards the continued conversation. I do know Elizabeth Peterson, the director of that bureau, and I'm looking forward to this meeting on Monday. Just because, her own team was here just weeks before and wrote up this beautiful report about our dash, then to just weeks later be told that it had to be rewritten. I think that it will be helpful for that bureau to understand how mixed messages can be frustrating. And I know that they're just trying to meet their requirements from the feds. And so it's that, the stuff rolls downhill. And so we push it back up and see if they can handle it a little bit differently. I do want to just acknowledge that the Public Charter Schools of New Mexico is holding a conference on December the 12th and the 13th. Jody attended with me last year. The school does have funds if anybody's interested in attending this year. And so but the deadline to register is Tuesday. So if anybody wants to attend and wants me to register on your behalf, please let me know, because I'll be there, and we do have funds if anybody would like to join me. It's an open invitation. And that is the end of my director's report. Very long today, so I appreciate your patience as we got through it all.
Woohoo. It means a lot of great work is being done. All right. Just very quickly, thank you again to Tina and Michelle for joining us today. I will say that this is very unusual to go this long. It's usually only like once or twice a year, in part because we didn't have a meeting last month, and also just because we had a lot to approve and talk about. So thank you for being here. Would you like to both introduce yourself to the other board members who maybe haven't been able to meet you yet? We can start with Tina.
Hey everybody, my name is Tina Martinez. I am a new retiree and trying to find things to do with my time. I retired from APS was there for 25 years as a teacher, as an administrator, and as a district resource. And in my role as a district resource, worked very closely with Gordon Burnell through adult basic education. And this is where my heart still is. So when the invitation came to come and, you know, be a part of this, I jumped at the opportunity. So I'm glad to be here, and thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining, Tina. All right, Michelle.
And I am Michelle Staley. I retired a lot later than you did after close to 20-some years with UNM. My background, my degrees are in special education. My focus was working with children and families who whose children either were developmentally delayed or were at risk for developmental delay. And kind of connected, well, Gordon Burnell, I will say my son graduated from here during COVID. And it was a real blessing, I will say. Changed his trajectory changed unbelievably. But aside from all of that, I've had the opportunity to work with PB&J. I hope you guys are working with PB&J. I was in grants at the time, and they did amazing work in the prison there in grants. And it opened me up to start recognizing this balance between the prisons and education and other support programs. So I won't go real in depth, but I'm just kind of excited about the potential for this opportunity. And I just think I'm in the same thing, looking for things to do. And my son was quite excited about this. And
Well, thank you both for sharing. We really appreciate your interest in serving on the board and your willingness to attend the meeting today. Jody and I are on the nominating committee, and so I'll reach out via email and propose a couple times that we can have a follow-up conversation, maybe answer any questions that you might have had after visiting our meeting today. Talk a little bit more about, you know, if you have any other questions about board duties, scheduling, things like that. Jody and I will have a conversation. We'll kind of share with the rest of the board. And then, you know, if that all progresses, we could move forward with nominating or approving nominations during the December meeting. So that's a little bit of what the trajectory will look like. Any questions real quick from Tina or Michelle?
I don't think so.
I can't think of any.
Great. Yeah, well, we'll definitely have a follow-up conversation. Another last announcement, exciting stuff. We have our annual board training scheduled with Kelly on Saturday, January 25th. So everybody put that in your calendars. Are there any last minute kind of people know that they have conflicts on that date? We wanted to go ahead and just get it scheduled with Kelly. She's going to be going to Africa after that. So we wanted to just get it on the calendars. If you do have a scheduling conflict, we do have the upcoming charter school conference that Beth just mentioned. We can schedule that by Tuesday, or we also have the asynchronous online options.
There is required annual training. And so this board has opted to do it together with a personalized trainer, which is great because she really then can answer questions. But the training, as Martha mentioned, can be accomplished in lots of other ways as well. So.
Great. All right. We look forward to that. We'll talk about specific times. Usually it's the big chunk of the morning, lunch, and then maybe another hour or two after lunch. So we can kind of plan around that. Our next board meeting is December 19th. Probably also, Beth, just for future, on the agenda, updating that it says October board meeting.
Ah, thanks.
Yep.
Man, there's typos.
No worries. I know you use the previous agenda, so I totally understand how that happens. All right. Do I have a motion to conclude our meeting
I move we adjourn our meeting.
Adjourn. Thank you. I was looking for that word, Deb. Thank you for that first. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, thank
For
you,
sure.
Jody. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, our meeting is adjourned for the November 21st Gordon Burnell Charter School Governing Council at 5:55 p.m. Thank you all for hanging in there. Really appreciate it.
Marathon meeting tonight, guys. I appreciate everybody. Thank you.
Yeah. All right, take care.
Thank you all.
Uh,
Bye.
We rarely